Hello guys, in this video I want to highlight a couple of really cool rock projects that I think you'll like. The first is this wall hanging and the accompanying table slash cabinet that I made out of Yellowstone River rocks, which was featured in my recent video, The Yellowstone River So Much More Than Agates. And I will also share with you a large coffee table that we have in our house that is made in a similar fashion out of rocks from the Cache La Poudre River here in Fort Collins. I worked in the granite shop, so I had some pretty good play privileges. I was actually partner at the time in the granite shop up there. And so I took these large rocks. They're actually, a lot of them are in the six or seven, maybe even 8-inch range. And we had a 14-inch blade. That's pretty standard for cutting granite countertops. So I mounted each rock in concrete. I made a mold. I think I used a milk carton or something along those lines, just so it would be square and it would sit on the saw table. I was able to cut halfway through, roughly, through the stone. I made 2 cuts with a 1/2-inch slab in between. I want to insert here that when I mention saws, pretty much in all my experience, they have always been bridge saws, such as the one you're seeing here, which was a 90-inch diamond blade cutting giant sandstone blocks. And I've recently posted a video highlighting these saws and the rocks that they cut and the amazing process there. But I want to point out, when I talk about cutting these river rocks, it was a bridge saw. It was not any other kind of saw. And so it would function just like you're seeing here, where the saw would move back and forth on a bridge and you'd step cut a little deeper each time. So that's what I'm talking about when I say I had to cut halfway through and then flip the rock over. I just thought it would be useful to clarify that and give you guys an opportunity to see our awesome saw again. Then I broke the rock out of the concrete, flipped it over, mounted it in the concrete again, and I had to get real good at lining up the cuts, making the cuts from the other side and having them hopefully line up with the first cuts. And I did pretty good enough to where I can grind them down and polish them. It's good to be artistic and create something with the rocks you collect. I've never been one to like piles. I always try to encourage people, do something with your rocks to use them in some interesting way. I'll take you out to the garage and I'll show you the cabinet that I made, because inadvertently I ended up with all these halves, the end cuts of all of these rocks. And I call this a cabinet, but it's probably more of a table or a storage box. And these are the halves I was telling you about. Most of these were left over from the wall hanging, but then I didn't have enough, so I had to intentionally cut, of course, other ones. There's always an excuse to play with more rocks. What we have here is one of the halves that I have left over from when I built that Yellowstone River cabinet. Of course, it's a piece of the Yellowstone River pudding stone, or leopard rock as some people call it. But what I wanted to point out, depending on the saw you use, I know at least some of you probably have those giant lapidary saws, maybe with a 36-inch or a 24, maybe 18, even a 12-inch blade. You can cut a pretty decent sized rock, but lapidary saws cut so smooth. And this was cut with a bridge saw, so it was pretty rough, but I still, as you can see there, I cut all these grooves in it. They're very shallow, just enough to rough it up and give the adhesive something to bond to, because you don't want these rocks falling off on your toes. If you decide to do a project like this and you cut rocks in half and glue them to plywood or concrete or whatever, you want them to stick. So I just recommend rough it up. I did this with, I think, the edge of a grinder blade or an angled grinder cup wheel, I think is what I used. And just scarred the surface enough so that the adhesive would have some traction. ammonite. I believe that's what those are called. I'm probably not correct there. Then this top is also made of rocks from the Yellowstone, and the way I cut these, again, I basically just made a big concrete block with all my favorite little rocks in it as the gravel. And these I cut on a tile saw, if I remember right. And the rocks popped right out of the cement being cut that thin, because I cut these down to like 1/8 of an inch maybe a little thicker. And then glued them to tiles, filled in the space between with epoxy, and polished them down. Here are the other two sides in the sun, so that you can get a look at some more fascinating geology. Here's a really nice migmatite. Of course, these come from the deepest levels where rock almost becomes molten again. Porphyry with perfectly formed and quite large crystals. It's a sandstone that's exclusively made of little black pebbles. And here you can see the sedimentary layering. I don't know if that is a brecciated quartzite. There's just an infinite array of geology exposed in the rocks of the Yellowstone. I hope this gives you guys some inspiration of some of the many things you can do with your rocks. What we're looking at here is the coffee table in our living room. And it's made in a similar fashion as what I was telling you about the Yellowstone rocks. But here, these are all rocks from the Cache La Poudre River in Fort Collins. So right away you can see it's a different mix of rocks. I've always thought it would be really cool to go to different rivers or different places. For example, the Great Lakes. There's a lot of really cool rock hunting there, and just make a table like this out of all Great Lakes rocks, or from wherever someone might be from. It's a business model I've had in my mind, but since I don't drive, I'm very limited in those means. But these are mostly rocks that my kids collected when they were little. We would go to the river all the time, and they were cut in a similar way. I made bricks of concrete with these rocks in them, sliced them, and then glued them to tiles. I had the wooden part, of course, made by a furniture company. And just the wooden part in the year 2000 cost me well over $1,000. I think like $1,200. And I calculated that I had over 100 hours of non-stop sawing time. For these, I used a tile saw. And then I don't remember how long it took to glue them to the tiles, fill in the space in between, and then polish it all down, cut them to size, mount them, etc., etc. So it's a labor of love. I don't know that I'll ever have the stamina to make another one. So that's why we've really held on to these and treasured them in the family. And there you go. Lots of ways to use our rocks so that they're not just in piles in the backyard. I hope you've enjoyed this video of these, what did I mention? 3 projects here. The wall hanging, the Yellowstone River cabinet that I call it, and here this coffee table with rock on top, all the way around the edges, veneering the legs, and of course the bottom shelf there. Please like, share, and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts. And it's always awesome sharing with you.